Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We are so excited today. As you know, Travis and I have to get annulments in our marriages, and annulments can be pretty confusing. So, we have someone very special here today that's going to explain to us the process of annulments and all the little things about it that we need to know. Stick around.
Hi, we're the Howdens.
After extensive research
And my miracle.
we've decided to become Catholic.
We shared our testimony video and then we prayed.
Now we invite you on our journey with us.
From our family to yours.
God bless you.
So, we are very thankful that Miss Edie McDaniel is here today. She is from St. Mark the Evangelist, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about what her role is, what annulments are. So, I'm first going to let you introduce yourself.
Okay. I am Edie McDaniel, and I am the Director of Religious Education at St. Mark the Evangelist Church in Summerfield, Florida. And my role here basically is adult education, children's education, the OCIA process, which is the process which the Howdens are going through right now to become Catholic. And I run that program. And as part of that program, I also am an advocate in the diocese for those who need annulments. And that's pretty much my role here at the moment.
Keep you nice and busy.
Changes daily.
I guess we can start at, can you tell us what an annulment is?
Okay. So in the Catholic Church, what you may or may not know, there are 7 sacraments within the church that we recognize as gifts that Jesus has given us. And we have a particular formula to follow for each one of those sacraments. So there are elements of a sacrament that need to be present in order for them to be valid. So for instance, baptism. You have to be baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and with either immersion or pouring of water involved. And that's how a baptism would be considered to be valid in the Catholic Church. Well, the same goes for a marriage. We consider marriage to be one of the sacraments of service. So there are 2 sacraments of service. One is marriage, and the other one is holy orders. Sacrament of marriage needs to take place within the church, and it needs to be witnessed by a priest or a bishop. And one thing people don't realize is in the Catholic Church, we don't consider the priest or bishop bestowing the sacrament on you. You bestow them on one another. So you bestow the sacrament on your husband, he bestows the sacrament on you. The priest or the bishop is there as a witness for the church that this actually took place, that you followed the proper procedures, you followed the proper protocols, and you did everything in the proper way, and therefore the marriage becomes a sacrament. Now, the sacrament of marriage has no real connection to a civil marriage. You know, I mean, you go to the courthouse, you get a piece of paper, they say you can get married, you go to a JP or a minister or whoever, and you get married. In the church, marriage is a sacrament, and it has to be specifically what the church declares it to be. And so when that does not happen, if you are married in some way and it is not considered a sacrament to the church, then they can declare your marriage null because it was not sacramental. It did not follow the proper form for a Catholic church. So we do a process that would be submitted to the diocese, and they would declare whether the marriage is a sacrament or not.
Okay. So kind of like if I were to go to the courthouse and then just go to a beautiful garden and get married, that would be kind of a lack of form.
Absolutely.
Right? Now,
Absolutely.
if I were to get married in the Catholic Church or in another church, for example, what Travis's example is, he got married in a church, not the Catholic Church, would that something that he needs to get annulled as well?
Right. So there are 2 basic types of annulments, and one is, as you mentioned, lack of form, and that is for a baptized Catholic. If you go and marry in a civil ceremony or by a justice of the peace, or even if you go and you marry in another Christian church or even a non-Christian church of some kind. You need to ask the diocese, your bishop, for permission to do that. And if you never did that and you got married anyway in that way, that's not a sacramental marriage. So we would do a lack of form annulment, which is a simple process. It's a simple one-step process.
And that's for Catholics only.
And that would be for Catholics only.
Okay.
Now, if you are a non-Catholic and you marry another non-Catholic in a civil ceremony or in the non-Catholic church, and your church recognizes that as a real marriage, then the Catholic Church in turn also recognizes it as a marriage.
Okay.
And you would need to then go through a long form process of annulment, which means you would have to explain, everything about how you met the person, when you got married, where you got married, what happened afterwards that caused this marriage not to be a valid marriage. Because in the annulment process, it can get very technical, and I don't want to get too technical with people, but the marriage has to be according to the form the church prescribes, and you have to freely enter into that marriage. Mm-hmm. So if there is any reason that you, after the marriage has ended, you look back and go, well, I really wasn't sure I wanted to be married. I wasn't really, all excited to get married and happy about this. Or what happens in a lot of cases is young people, teenagers, get pregnant and their parents say, okay, you have to get married.
Oh.
And they get married. Well, years later, it could be only a year later or 2 years later or even 10 years later, they divorce. Well, it could be because they were never sacramentally bound to that other person because they only married the person because of the pregnancy. Sure. So, it can get very technical in terms of the reasons, but basically, the easiest way to explain it is two non-Catholic Christians who marry in a church or a civil ceremony are considered validly married, and they would need an annulment. And again, long form, you have to go through the whole process.
Okay. How long does each process take about?
Okay. Normally with a what they call lack of form marriage, which is the short form, it's normally only a matter of weeks, unless there is something in the marriage that the tribunal will look at and say, we're not quite sure, let's get some more information first. Mm-hmm. But normally it's just a matter of weeks because you submit everything and you say, okay, this one was Catholic and the other one was not Catholic, but they didn't get dispensations to marry, and they didn't get dispensations to marry outside of the church without a priest present. Mm-hmm. Or they were both Catholics and never got permission from either bishop of either party to do this. Because you can, if you're Catholic, you can apply for a dispensation to marry outside of the Catholic Church. It's rare that you get that dispensation because there has to be a very good reason. Mm-hmm. Your spouse is going to be shipped overseas, and the only opportunity is for you to go to see this justice of the peace because the Catholic priest can't do it. Maybe
Right.
So it could take usually, I would say, probably no more than 4 to 6 weeks. Okay. My experience is that it's been less than that, but 4 to 6 weeks is average. The long form can take a long time. It can take a year. It could take 10 years.
Oh.
And the difference is the person who is filing for an annulment is called a petitioner, and the other party in the marriage or the annulment would be called the respondent. So the respondent is given the opportunity to advise the tribunal whether they believe that this was a sacramental marriage, and sort of see and hear the testimony of the other party and dispute anything that they think that this other party has said that's incorrect. Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, if it goes back and forth, much like any kind of legal case, it could drag on for a while. So it could go 10 years. Normally, most of the time, I think it's 1 to 3 years for an annulment. But again, we can never predict how long it's going to take. It all is based on how many facts you have when you come to apply for it.
Okay. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So is this something that I would need an attorney for?
No. What we do, I mean, you could consult an attorney, but you would have to get a specialized attorney because they have to be versed in canon law, because the church has its own set of laws. Mm-hmm. And so any attorney that you would hire would need to know canon law. Most of the time, the church will provide anybody who wants to apply for an annulment an advocate, which, again, that's my role here as an advocate. The respondent, once they get their paperwork, can request an advocate. And then if they're outside of the diocese that the annulment is filed in, the diocese would contact their diocese, and that diocese would assign an advocate for them. Okay, but you don't need to hire an attorney for any of this stuff unless you chose to. But again, careful.
Right. So attorneys cost money, so it's good to know that you don't need an attorney.
Yeah.
But speaking of money, how much do annulments cost?
Well, it depends on the diocese. The Orlando diocese, which is where we are, does not charge for an annulment and would not charge unless there was some extraordinary cost that they would have to incur to be able to research or find out the facts. If they had to have a large expenditure, they might ask the petitioner to, help defray the cost. But other dioceses, sometimes they'll have just a nominal fee of maybe $250 or $500 or something like that. And there are other dioceses that can charge, $1,000, $5,000. I mean, it can vary from place to place. So, but there is no set cost set by the church for any of this. And it's all dependent on the bishop of the diocese where you live.
Okay. And how do I figure that out? Do I just go to that diocese website?
Well, you would call the diocese tribunal office, okay? And you would tell them that you are inquiring about an annulment. Somebody there would talk to you. If there's a cost incurred, they would let you know that. And or you can just simply ask, how much does this cost me? And they'll let you know. They're usually right up front with that kind of thing. They don't want any surprises, So yeah, you can just call the diocese.
Okay. And speaking of tribunal, that's a brand new word for us as previous Protestants. What does that even mean?
Okay, so basically, as I said, the church has its own set of laws. We have canon law, which is the church's law, Catholic Church's law. And so as such, we have priests and lay people and religious who are trained, just like any secular lawyer would be, in canon law. Okay, so they may, as part of their schooling, whether it's a priest or a lay person or a religious, they would take courses in canon law. And each diocese sets up what's called a tribunal, and think of it as sort of the court, the local appellate court. Okay, because the Supreme Court would be the tribunal in Rome. Okay, so if you were turned down for anything in your local church, you could then go to Rome to contest the decisions. But you better be on solid ground. No?
Yeah.
But yeah, so each diocese would have their own court, their own appeals court, so to speak, or I shouldn't say appeals court, like appellate court type of thing. And what happens is when there is an annulment, there is a lot of paperwork to fill out, as you and Travis are learning. Lots of paperwork that has to be done, and it is all submitted to the tribunal. And somebody on that tribunal or that court is chosen to review all of your documents. Now, if it's a short form or a lack of form annulment, usually that one person will review it, look over the documents that you send to back up what you've applied, and make the decision. If it's a long form, letters are sent out to the respondent, and you are asked to provide witnesses to the marriage that could verify the things that you're saying happened in the marriage did happen. And so they would send out letters and questionnaires to these witnesses as well as the respondent. and they have to wait for those replies to come back. In the meantime, they normally will send a petition for the petitioner to sit with their advocate and go through this questionnaire. And it's more detailed and involved than the initial paperwork. The initial paperwork is all about what the marriage was, when the marriage was, how the marriage went. This questionnaire, the second part of it, is more detailed in terms of personalities and habits, your family life growing up, their family life growing up. So there's a lot more detail to it at that point. The tribunal gets all of that paperwork, and usually the full tribunal will come together to review this paperwork and come to a decision, like any other, appeals court, so to speak. They would come together, they would all view the paperwork, they would view, as an advocate, I send in my summary and a brief stating what I know, and any information, additional information that's not in that paperwork, I would put in a cover letter to sort of give them more information, because the more information I can give them, the better the chances are that the annulment will be granted. So they sit and they review all of this and they come to the decision. Once they get all of the questionnaires back, including the respondent and the witnesses, then they review everything and make their final decision.
Wow. Okay. I remember when we were trying to get our documents together. Now, Travis and I have different forms. I have a short form to do. Travis has a long form to do. We were trying to get originals of everything. So that's marriage, divorce, baptismal certificates. Even like our IDs and everything. It was it was a lot of paperwork. But it's good to already start looking for those things.
Yes.
Have that done. Even trying to get certified copies just in case.
Yes.
And then, like you said, finding witnesses.
Yes.
Maybe contacting them ahead of time and saying, "Hey,
I'm going to apply for this, and can I use you as a witness to these facts in our marriage?"
And now, will those witnesses have to come to your state and talk about it?
Nope. It's they just fill out a questionnaire. Okay. They're sent a questionnaire by the tribunal, and they fill that questionnaire out based on what the circumstances of the marriage were. They just fill out what they know, and then they return it to the tribunal. Now,
will the ex-spouse, what will they be receiving?
The ex-spouse will receive a notification that you have applied for an annulment. They do not receive, and I want to make this really clear because we do have cases where there has been abuse on one side or another, and people are very nervous about the ex-spouse finding out where they are and where they live and that kind of thing. They are never given any personal information. Okay, they are simply told that you have applied for this annulment, and they have a right to have their side heard. If they choose to want to see the testimony you have given, then they have to go to the diocese. So the other person, the respondent, only gets to see what you've written, if they choose.
Okay. Obviously, this channel is for people who are new to becoming Catholic, who are possibly interested in becoming Catholic, or who have been Catholics their whole life, but want to really get into their faith and learn more. So for someone who is at the very beginning of this process and thinks, oh, I need to get a previous marriage annulled, what's the very first step that they take?
The very first step I would advise, if they have already a parish that they are familiar with, maybe they've gone to Mass a few times, or that kind of thing, to check with their pastor at that parish. Now, if it's somebody who's just brand spanking new and has gone to 4 or 5 different parishes and don't really know any priest that they would feel comfortable to go to and talk to about that, they would call their local diocese and explain that they were interested in coming back into the faith, but they had been married previously. And divorced and remarried. Because again, I want to really stress that an annulment is only necessary if you're going to remarry after the first marriage. Okay, so if you're a single person, and I've had plenty of people who are single, they've divorced, but they have no intention of marrying again. They're done. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, I'm finished. I always, depending on the age of the person, I will always advocate that they try and go for an annulment, because 20 years from now, you can change your mind. I mean, if you're 38 and you say, no, I'm done. You get to 58 and you meet Mr. Wonderful. Okay, well, now you're not done, and now you have to start the process. So get it over and done with, and get it taken care of early, even if you don't plan to remarry. But yeah, call the diocese, and what they will do is there are advocates throughout the diocese, so they will refer you to the one closest to you. Okay, if it's not the parish right near you, then it might be one town over or something like that.
And we found through our situation that at the church that we go to, there is not an advocate. So we were graciously set up with Miss Edie to help us. So if there's not one at your church, there will always be one that's there to help you.
Yep, there's one nearby somewhere.
Yes. So once Travis and my marriages in the past get officially annulled, are we free to get married in the Catholic Church?
Normally, you will get a marriage that says that they have reviewed everything and the marriage is declared. They've given you a declaration of nullity, which is what it's called. Now, there are cases where the diocese may say any further marriage is restricted. So they might tell you that you are restricted from being married again. But it's usually a temporary restriction. And what they will request is that you would go and see a counselor. Okay. And why they do that is, for instance, in the case of you and Travis, you're already married. So they know you're going to want to convalidate this marriage once these marriages are declared null and void. They may say to you, okay, we would like you to go spend a session with one of the particular counselors that we recommend, so that they can be assured that you have, if there are any issues with the marriage, with the relationship, or anything at all, these trained counselors can either spot the problem or just kind of help you to recognize any issues you may have and whether or not you can or will resolve those issues. And once you've received that counseling, they then will send a report to the diocese. And then based on that report, the diocese will send you a letter saying, okay, you're free to marriage. The restriction has been lifted. It doesn't happen in every annulment, but it could. So,
I mean, it seems like the Catholic Church is not saying, we rule you, you're not allowed to do this. They just care. They want you to have a successful, beautiful marriage as God intends it to be.
Exactly. And, if you've made mistakes in the past, that's we all have. We've all been there. We've all been there. We've all been there, and the Catholic Church just wants to protect you and your future or current spouse from going through anything in the future. They want your marriage to be successful. They want you to have beautiful children like you do. And they want every happiness for you. And so the best way to do that is just to have you spend some time with a counselor.
So just kind of closing thoughts. I think the biggest thing is to make sure that you have as much documentation as possible, any proof of anything negative that was happening in the marriage. Is that the right way to say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely find your baptismal certificate, especially if you were not baptized Catholic. If you're baptized in another Christian church, it can be very hard to find those documents. If you were like me that was baptized in a Catholic church, the only way to get that certificate, if you don't have it with you, contact that church and they will always have it. They'll send that to you. But start getting all of your documents ready. The more proof, the better. Contact your witnesses. Let them know ahead of time that it's coming.
And the one thing I would also add to any Catholic, if you've baptized a Catholic, and for instance, in my own case, the church where I was baptized doesn't exist anymore because Catholic churches have closed over the years, and they've merged with other churches. So if you go looking for that church that you were baptized in and it doesn't exist, you call that diocese. Okay, and that diocese, either they have the documents in their archives, because every Catholic church archives every document in all of the sacramental books. So either they will have the documents or they will tell you which church to contact that has the documents. So no Catholic church closes and destroys any documents. They're either passed on to the church where they're being absorbed into, because that's usually what happens, or the documents go to the diocese. So just be aware of that. If you go looking for the church and go, oh no, it's not there anymore, what do I do? Call the diocese.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's also if you knew you were baptized Catholic but don't know where you were baptized, can I just call that?
But you know where the state is. For instance, I'm from Boston, in case anybody wasn't sure of that from my accent. So if I didn't know where I was baptized or what church I was baptized in, I knew I was born and raised in Boston, so I would call the Boston Archdiocese and ask them if they could point me in the right direction.
Okay.
So yeah.
Cool. Any other closing facts or any other suggestions that you give to people?
What I would say to people is it is a process of remembering all the circumstances that you can. And one of the biggest impediments for some of the people I deal with is, this marriage may have been 15, 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. So they don't remember all the details. And what I would always tell people is, if that's the case, if this was a marriage that happened a long time ago, try to start, as you begin to think about the process and whether this is something you need to do, start trying to remember the important parts of that marriage, when it happened, how long you dated, where you lived, any of the circumstance. Try to recall. And again, in an abusive situation, a lot of us want to just forget all of that because it's over and done with and I don't have to deal with it anymore, so I want to forget it all. And I understand that, but these are all the details that you're going to need to remember. So begin the process of, sort of going through your mind and opening up the doors that you thought were closed.
Well, Miss Edie, thank you so much. We are
pleasure.
So grateful. If you all have any other questions whatsoever, please feel free to put it in the comments. I'll send it over to Miss Edie. She was very happy to do this video with us, so I'm sure that she'll be very happy to answer any questions as well.
Absolutely.
Also, again, reach out to your diocese if you have any questions. Reach out to your church priest if you have any questions. We are praying for you. We hope that you are all well and that your journey is going wonderfully. We love you, and we'll see you next time.
God bless.